Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I am gonna... Alright, so we're gonna just start with the meditation first. Oh yeah, and I forgot to ask if... Do you have a candle or no? Okay, awesome. Good. Um, oh yeah, and just before we get started, I am going to be recording this, so that way you guys can reference it later on if you need to. I'll put a link up on for like an unlisted YouTube in the posts feed. So if you guys need to look back at it later, it'll be still available since I know that usually we have like the text to refer to. So hopefully it'll record properly and it can be kept up for that. Um, so we're going to start with a meditation, and it is going to be using the candle. So before we start the meditation, you might just want to light it. Just one guideline for during the meditation: if you haven't used a candle before, just be aware that you shouldn't be looking directly at the flame. You kind of want to have it placed in a way that ideally you can look at a point that's beyond the flame so that it's kind of more right on the edge of your vision or in the peripheral, especially if you're in a darker room. So if you want to go ahead and light your candle, it's basically going to be used as it helps to be used as a point of focus and also for visualization. So for some people who sometimes have a harder time with passive types of meditation, it can help to have something outside of yourself to focus on. But if you are doing an active meditation, you can still use the candle and have that as part of the meditation as well. Um, so yeah, so just try and sit comfortably. You don't have to sit with your legs crossed or anything like that. You can even be lying down. The main idea is that you want to have a position that's comfortable and where your spine is supported. So if you're sitting vertically, you want to be sitting in a way that you're not necessarily sitting perfectly straight, but you want to have a supported spine. Or if you're lying down, you want to have your full spine supported and not have any like major curves in your spine or anything like that. So just try and sit in a way that's comfortable. And you're going to focus on the breath. You want to focus on the air that's flowing into your lungs. And you can try and imagine it as being clear, or if it's easier for you, you can imagine a color that evokes calm and neutrality for you. The key point is more that it's neutral and that it's something that is calming if you do choose to use a color. And then as you exhale, you want to imagine that it's either dirty or murky. You can picture it as a heavy smoke that's coming out of your mouth as you exhale, or you can picture little pieces of dust or dirt that are coming out as you exhale. And really the association you want here is that you're bringing in a neutral energy and that you're expulsing anything that's negative or sticky energy, maybe anything that has been holding on to you or sticking to you, or maybe something that you have been holding on to either voluntarily or involuntarily. And I'll just let you guys take a few breaths with that imagery in mind. If you have a hard time with visualization, and I don't just mean like today, but just in general, you can always choose to do a more active meditation like writing or drawing. And I think everyone today is doing a more passive meditation, but I'm still going to just mention some methods of doing an active meditation. Um, just because there's some days where it's just not in the cards for us to be doing a passive meditation. Sometimes our minds are just all over the place. Even for myself, I'm used to doing passive meditation. I do it pretty much every day, but there's some days where there's just no way and my brain is just not there for it. So you can still meditate even if your mind is kind of not wanting to participate in that passive way. Um, One way that you can do it is to draw or color, and it can be just really abstract just by picking whatever colors feel suitable to the material if you're using a guided meditation, or if you're just meditating without any type of guided aspect, you can just use whatever colors kind of convey the energy that you want to be focusing on for that day. Or you can use also, if you don't have colors, you can, and you just have one color of pen, for example, you can use automatic drawing and either focus it to make yourself kind of draw in a more specific guided way that's based on what you're hearing. Or you can do also automatic writing and just be describing the things that you would otherwise be wanting to try and picture in your mind. So that's really good for people who have a hard time with visualization, just to write down the things that they would normally be trying to visualize instead of trying to picture them in their brain. If at any point you space out or lose track, that's totally fine. Just pick up wherever we're at and then maybe just take notice of where your mind went so that after the meditation you can try to identify the pathway your mind took and the reason behind it. We're often taught in meditation that the wandering mind is the enemy, but you can kind of consider it more as a scout or a messenger. It's usually trying to bring up something that we could benefit from investigating further. So instead of kind of ignoring the wandering mind, you can acknowledge it and take note of it so that it can be heard out maybe in more depth at an appropriate time. So kind of like a child trying to get your attention, that might not be the perfect moment, but you can still acknowledge and say like, hey, this is, I want to hear what you have to say and we can talk about this afterwards. So just take note of that. And then maybe after the meditation, take a few minutes to ask yourself, like, why did my brain go in that particular direction? Like, what is that about? Or what was that image that it was trying to conjure up? And that can kind of give us a lot of insight into maybe anxieties that we're having that particular day or things like that. So now we're going to bring our attention back to the candle. And this meditation, we're in a group right now, and sometimes it's a bit harder to focus. So it's really more just kind of hopefully giving you guys some guidelines of a meditation that you can use in the future when you're maybe on your own. The candle we're going to focus on now, this is representative of your own personal flame. This is the energy that you have inside you that we all have. Everyone has it, but yours might be feeling a little bit weaker today. So you can lend some of the energy from the fire that you have in front of you if you have a candle burning. And you can also take a little bit from the room today that everyone is in. The good thing about having this type of fire energy is that you can always afford to give some away to others, and it doesn't make yours any weaker. Fire just spreads and you can give it to someone. So if you have a little bit extra or if you need some extra energy and you feel like your flame is a little bit dimmer today, then feel free to take some right now from the energy that's in the room. And this meditation is really about learning how to stoke that fire on your own and also using it as an offensive to burn away things that don't help you move forward. So going back to the breath that we had earlier, every time that you inhale, you want to picture that that oxygen is feeding the flame and helping it burn stronger and brighter. And that when you exhale, you're exhaling all of that kind of byproduct of the combustion. So try to focus on that imagery. we're going to use the flame to burn away negative. This can be either negative thoughts that you have throughout the day. We have a lot of negative self-talk, or it can be about something that you heard from someone else, for example. Basically, what you want to do is, in your mind, you want to write down on a piece of paper the thought, or the if it's a negative word, then you can put it on that piece of paper, and you basically want to throw it in the flames. If you're doing a more active meditation, you can physically write the word or the thought on a piece of paper. If you are going to actually burn it in the fire, just be sure that you have like a safe way of doing that, and you're not just lighting things on fire in your bedroom. Have like a metal receptacle and water at hand. But you can also just crumple up the piece of paper or tear it apart and throw it in the trash can, and just picture the trash can as being your flame, for example. And that's one way that you can burn away negative energy or negative thoughts and not let it kind of affect that flame. It doesn't make it burn brighter or less bright. It just kind of is used as an offensive energy. And another way that we're going to learn to feed the fire is by providing it sustenance beyond just the oxygen that we're breathing. Anytime that you feel like you need that extra energy, taking deep breaths, even if you don't have time to do a full meditation, can help nourish that flame. But another way that you can do it is to kind of do the opposite as to what we're doing with the negative thoughts, by reinforcing it with positive thoughts. And in this case, what you would want to do is, in your mind, you can carve the positive thought onto a piece of wood or a log, and then in your mind still just be putting that log into the fire and allowing it to feed the flame slowly and kind of have a long lasting effect on the fire, and carry that with you throughout your day or throughout your week. And this can be positive things that you've heard from other people, but it could also be positive things that you are choosing to tell yourself. It can be things that you're aspiring to and that maybe you don't currently feel that are part of your tool belt yet, but that you want to be carrying that energy throughout the day. So this type of meditation is a really good way to start your day. I like doing it in the morning because I feel like any anxieties, I can just kind of burn them away right at the beginning of my day, especially if I have like a test or a photo shoot or anything that I kind of am stressed out about. Burn away any of the negative things, and then stoke that fire with just the breath and just positive things that I can kind of let feed the flame throughout the day. So that's the flame meditation. I'll just give you guys a few minutes to kind of sit with that imagery without me talking at you. So I'm going to let that kind of sit with you for a couple minutes, and then we'll get started with the working. All right, so just take now a minute to kind of get back to the moment if you were still meditating. And we're going to start now the more, I guess, educational portion before we start the actual enchantment. I just wanted to talk a little bit about love witchcraft, since that was the theme for this month. If at any point you guys have questions or comments or anything, just feel free to interrupt. Just type it into the chat and I'll I'll address it. Yeah. So otherwise I just pretty much will be starting to go through it, but just stop me at any point, and then afterwards we'll do the enchantment together. So first of all, I wanted to talk about what exactly is love witchcraft and what does it include, because we often perceive, or I guess it gets promoted as something that's kind of only about romantic relationships or sexual relationships, but love witchcraft is actually supposed to encompass all kinds of relationships. It can be family or friendships. It can be working relationships, partnerships, platonic. Really, any type of relationship could fall under love witchcraft. It also includes the relationship that you have with yourself. Self-care, self-love is all falls into that umbrella. It's also often promoted as having more of a healing bonds or promoting communication, but it can also be used for the inverse. It can be used to break bonds or like deteriorate communication. So it's not necessarily always a positive form of witchcraft. It can involve both sides of the coin. One of the most important things about love witchcraft is the aspect of consent. There's a misconception that ethical means positive, but that's not always the case. Just because what you're doing is a positive change, for example, or what you perceive as a positive change, doesn't mean that what you're doing is necessarily ethical. There's a lot of situations in which something may be perceived as ethical, but actually ends up being potentially very harmful or even crippling. And one example that is nothing to do with witchcraft, but I thought it would be something maybe easier to understand. For example, the cases of Western colonization and missionary Christianity. The intentions may have been very good, but the fundamental lack of understanding of the situation at hand, coupled with the belief that we knew better, ended up causing irreparable damage to these places and ended up being really, really negative. So this is where the importance of consent comes into play, and why we still need to practice consent even if what we're doing is quote unquote positive or beneficial, because we will never know the full situation of where someone else is at. And it's not, ethical to impose on someone else what you believe to be the right way or the correct way or what you believe to be a positive, because it might not be that way at all for that person that's actually living in that situation. So I thought we could maybe touch on what is consent. And I have a graphic here for you. Just a second. So I got this from Planned Parenthood. So this is obviously to do with relationships, but I think it's also equally applicable to witchcraft. So I thought it would be a good, perfect refresher. I like it because it's very easy to remember and it's very clear. So the graphic says, I love fries, or I heart fries. And FRIES is the acronym for freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. So I think this is mostly pretty self-explanatory, and you guys have probably heard about this before, so I'm not going to go into each of these points. I'm just going to go into how it relates specifically to love witchcraft. So obviously, I think the most glaring one here is freely given. As in, the other person has to be aware of what's going on. That's also where the informed is coming in. And it has to be something that they actually agree to. So if you're going to go into love witchcraft, it has to be in a way that always involves the parties that are touched by the spells or the divination that you're performing. And I think the most often neglected point in this one is reversible. And this is where I think witchcraft could really learn from this type of graphic. The reversible aspect is something that personally I think is good practice to have in all of your spells, regardless of whether or not they involve another person, because you don't ever know the full impact of your spell or, whatever it is that you're doing. So reversible is something that I've talked about before in previous chats that we've had, and also in articles that I've posted. But reversible is always a component that you should have included in your spell, but especially if you're involving other people, even if they have consented to it, the reversible aspect is super important, because they might not fully understand the consequences of the working that they're asking for, and there should be a way for them to go back and change their mind at any point. But also another aspect of reversible that I think should be considered is reversible should not have to include you as the spell worker if you're doing workings for another person. So, for example, if someone asks you to do a spell on their behalf because they don't practice witchcraft or whatever the case may be, that they have requested for you to do the working for them, there should be something included as part of the spell that allows them to reverse it instead of having to involve you to reverse it on their behalf. Especially because sometimes either, they could change their mind, let's say, a year down the line. And then what if at that point they no longer have your contact information? Maybe you're not even practicing anymore at that point. I mean, I hope you all are, but you never know. There can be all types of different factors. Maybe the relationship that you have with that person has deteriorated at that point and they just don't feel comfortable approaching you for a reversal, or they're too shy, or they just feel uncomfortable asking you to do something when they've already asked you to do the working in the first place. So just give them a way that they can do the reversal themselves instead of forcing them and having that kind of power over them where they have to come back to you to, have that working reversed. I hope that kind of makes sense so far. Okay, awesome. And I know that not everyone here does workings for other people, so if this doesn't apply to you, obviously just disregard it, but I felt that it was an important component. So jumping off from that, one of the important things to do if you do workings for other people, not just spellcraft, but also divination, is being really clear about any boundaries that you might have that it's important for other people to know. So for example, if you offer services and you offer, let's say, tarot readings, and you don't feel comfortable predicting relationships for other people, those are things that you want to be really clearly outlining in some way in your services. So one thing that as far as the boundaries go is you have to be really specific with your wording. And what I mean by that is if you're not comfortable specifically with predicting relationships or predicting, am I going to end up with X person, or what do I have to do to get this person to fall in love with me, or something like that, be really specific that that's the thing that you're not comfortable with. I've seen some people put in their services that they don't do, for example, any type of relationship spreads, or they don't do any type of love spreads, but that's really, really general and broad, and that could be pushing away a lot of people that might be looking for something that you would actually be quite comfortable doing and that you might actually even want to help them with. So, for example, you might be pushing away someone who they just want to improve their communication skills with one person, or they just want to understand someone better, but because you've only put that you don't do relationships, they might not come to you for that. So one way that you can do that, and this is personally what I use on my services page, is I say that I reserve the right to deny any type of request that I don't feel comfortable with or for any reason. And that allows me to kind of judge on a more case-by-case basis, because also some people might approach you and ask a question, and this gets into what to do when someone is crossing what is perceived as a boundary for you. And sometimes you can just check with the person and see, well, maybe it's the way that they've worded their question, and maybe you can get behind the purpose of their question and go to something further. So someone might, for example, say, I want you to do a spell for me to make this specific person fall in love with me. And I would personally not be comfortable with that at all. But then I might ask them, okay, well, like, why is it that you want to do this spell? Like, do you not feel confident enough in this person? Do you feel like you're not good enough for this person? Or is it you feel that they haven't noticed you, or that, what is the reason behind the spell? And then maybe you can find a way that actually is does work for you. Maybe you'll realize that what they actually want is that they don't feel like they have the confidence enough to approach this person. And then so maybe a confidence spell would be more appropriate. Or maybe they feel like they need to work on their communication skills. Or maybe they feel like they don't know this person enough and they're just not sure how to go about getting to know that person enough. Like sometimes you can end up with a working that is completely different from their original question, but that actually satisfies that person's needs a lot better than the original thing that they asked for. And the same thing goes for divination as far as reading tarot cards. I've gotten a lot of questions that seem very specific, where they'll be like, what do I need to do to get this person to notice me or fall in love with me? But then once you talk to them a little bit, you kind of realize that, okay, actually this person is just feeling really alone and they want to know like how to get out of this rut that they're in, and then you can give them a much better and more accurate reading based on their actual question than maybe the original one that they asked. However, that said, as far as if you talk to the person and then they are either not budging, or that you realize that in the end their question actually does cross those boundaries that you have, just be really firm and specific in saying no. Like you don't have to go around it, or you could be really firm with the person, because if you kind of go like, oh, well, I don't know if that's really something I would want to do, just say like, no, I'm sorry, that's not something that I'm interested in doing. If they've paid for your services, you can simply refund them. And if you have anyone else to recommend to them that does that kind of working, then you can do that. Or you can just let them do their own research and figure it out for themselves. But it's really important to keep and maintain those boundaries that you have for yourself, and to not force yourself to do something that you don't feel comfortable with, because first of all, that it's probably going to cause you to have an inaccurate reading, or to have like not a great working. It might just be completely ineffective, and it would just waste your time and waste the other person's time, and it's just not a good position to put yourself in or the other person in. So if there are no questions, that was all the information that I wanted to give you guys about love witchcraft and how consent is involved with ethical love witchcraft and divination. Okay, that's perfect. So if there are no questions, I'm just going to give a few minutes so that we can gather our items, and then we'll do the group enchantment. So let's say about 5-ish minutes. So for this, you need, I put it in the chat earlier, but the candle was just for the meditation, so you don't need the candle anymore. Basically, you need your enchanted item and either incense or a cleansing spray, and a divination item. But the divination item is just as a method of charging, so if you don't have one with you today, that's fine. You can do it another time. I'm just going to be talking to you about a couple different ways that you can use to charge the item. So we'll take about 5 minutes, and then we'll do the enchantment. Alright, so hopefully that was enough time to gather what you needed. French fries. Now I'm jealous. I want French fries. Okay, so basically this is... I don't remember who's been here for the last ones, but some of the other workings we've done have been a lot more ceremonial, depending on the type of work that we're doing. This one is a lot more folk related. So I love this type of enchantment because it's really versatile. So this, like today's focus is really going to be, we wanted it to be more geared towards promoting neutral and positive energy and keeping away kind of negative energy. But you can use this structure of enchantment for pretty much any type of enchantment that you want to do. The main difference is going to be the energy that you want to focus into the enchantment. So you can use either one of those, any type of thing for that. And also, the great thing about this, for the energy part, is that I'm going to show you with the divination tools at the end how to charge the enchantment with a kind of different type of, not really a different type of energy, because at the core of it the enchantment is already programmed and the item is already programmed with the energy that you want, but you can kind of help to direct that enchantment in a certain way using the divination items. So either runes or tarot cards or any type of other item that you want to use. I mean, you could even use, if you wanted to, certain herbs or plants to charge it, depending on what your correspondence is with those items. So I'll talk about that at the end. We'll do the enchantment first, and then I'll go into those parts once we have the enchantment completed. So the first step that you want to do is to prepare your space. And by preparing your space, this is going to be a little bit different for everyone, but mainly what this means is to have an area that is clear. So you don't actually have to cast a circle or do any of those types of things, but you just want to have a clear area. So if, for example, you're working on a desk, like I usually work on my art table, you just want to have a space that is free of clutter, and it doesn't have to be a big space. It can be like, just a couple feet in width or something like that. Just a little clear space so that it's clear that that's where you're working. And you want to mentally tell the space that you're going to be working with it, or you can say it out loud, whichever feels the most effective to you. So kind of just letting the space know that you're getting ready to work with it, and that, kind of just saying to that little area, like, hey, like, we're getting some work done right now. And you want to just kind of mentally invite that space to participate in the working with you. And in this situation, since we have a group available to us, also invite the chat room to participate as part of your space. So that way we can all have a kind of common energy flowing together while we do the working. And it will make the enchantment stronger because we do have everyone having the same focus on the same type of energy and the same type of enchantment. So this is the same kind of advantage that we would have if we were working, for example, with a coven. The difference is a coven is, generally speaking, it's not the case for all covens, but they are usually having a permanent link, and they often direct most of their workings to a common goal. Whereas in this case, we're just using a common space to tap into that energy together at the same time while we're all doing the same or similar type of enchantment. Kind of like, for example, if you're in an office space, people are generally all working with the same type of energy. Or if you go to a gym, it's the same type of energy. It just means that the space is all working towards kind of that same goal, even if it's just on a temporary basis. And once your space is ready, you can place the item that you want to enchant in front of you in that space. And then this is where you would light the incense or use the cleansing spray. Just before you light the incense or use the spray, I'm just going to explain the purpose of it. So if you're using an incense, the purpose for the incense is to basically we're creating a boundary around our working space, saying that we don't want any outside energy or influence to be coming into that space with us. So that way, what you're doing is you're working with just one type of energy that you are allowing and that you are creating between you and the enchanting item. So when you light the incense, you want to make sure that the incense is either on the limit of that space or outside the limits of that space, just kind of on the boundary. So that way you're not cleansing the energy that you're trying to work with. So basically, the important thing is you don't want to put the incense or the cleansing spray inside of your working area, because then it's just kind of like self-defeating, because then you're just basically cleansing out the stuff that you're trying to work with. But you want that, you want that energy that's inside of your working space. Also, if you excuse me, if you work with any friendly spirits or deities and you want to include them on the working with you, invite them into the working space before you light the incense, so that way they can be inside the space with you while you work, and then light the incense again on the boundary or right outside of the boundary. If you're using a cleansing spray, it's the same idea as with the incense. You just spray it outside the boundary so that it's not inside the boundary of your working space. And for the incense, you don't need to have it as any particular scent, because we're actually using the smoke as the boundary and not the scent of the incense itself. That said, if you want to use the scent of the incense, like for example, if you want to use lavender because of its cleansing properties, you can totally do that. It's just I didn't include it because I didn't want to have people going shopping out for like a specific type of incense, and it's totally fine to use just the smoke from the incense instead of the scent itself. Sorry, I have a bit of a cough today. So hopefully so far that makes sense for everyone. So once you have lit the incense and you've placed the enchanted item in front of you, now comes the step of actually going ahead with the enchantment. So you want to take the item that you're going to enchant, and basically you're going to hold it and you're going to speak to it. So you can do this in your mind, or you can do it out loud and actually like speak. I like to speak into the item, like kind of whisper into it. But this is totally whatever your personal preference is. Some people do it completely mentally, or they'll hold it to their chest or to their throat. Whatever feels more appropriate to you, go ahead and do that for the enchantment portion. If you're the type of person who prefers to write your spells, then you might just want to kind of use this structure and take the time to actually write your spell and then actually complete this enchantment later on. For some people, the choice of words or the wording is really important. It's not 100% important, like, or necessary to perform the enchantment, but definitely, like, if you want to use this space later, then you can do that. But if you just want to tell the item, basically the goal is you want to tell it the type of energy that you want it to imbue it with, and speak to it basically as if you would be telling a person and giving them instructions. That's kind of the idea behind it. So giving instructions as clearly as possible, as if you were introducing someone to a new project and you want to kind of give them all the information that they need as someone who's new to this project. You know what your goal is and what you would like them to do. So you can tell it, for example, the type of energy that you want. What I recommend is some people focus really heavily just on positive energy. I want to banish negative energy and I want to bring in positive energy. But I would recommend to bring in positive and neutral energy. And the reason for that is positive energy is what you need to move forward and for growth. But the neutral energy is where you gain the stability and the space to be able to promote that growth. So that's just my personal recommendation, is to welcome in both neutral and positive energy. And when we say negative energy, we're not meaning bad situations. It doesn't mean you're going to protect yourself from any like unpleasant eventuality or unpleasant events. It specifically means the type of energy that would be blocking your growth or preventing you or kind of holding you back. That's the type of energy that we're talking about. So some some people think, oh well, this enchantment didn't work because something shitty happened to me today, and this enchantment is only supposed to bring me positive energy. But the fact of the matter is, the shitty thing that happened might be the thing that you needed to grow. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands kind of that part of it, where positive energy doesn't necessarily mean that like nothing bad is or like unpleasant is ever going to happen to you, because sometimes we need those events to grow and to move forward. Um, that said, what the enchantment can also be focused on is the relationships. So events are one thing, people are another. Usually there's no positive side to having someone who is holding you back, to maintaining a relationship with that person. So I don't want that to be confused with what I was saying about negative energy or like negative events. A shitty event is something that can help you to move forward, or it can be a pivotal point as to going down a different path. A shitty person is just a shitty person. And while there might be an event associated with that person, you don't by any means have to stay around shitty people to grow. I just want to make that really, really clear. There's no situation in which maintaining a relationship with a shitty person is like a positive thing or a good thing. So this is also something that the enchantment can help with, is to help you determine when those relationships are beneficial or when they are deteriorating your personal well-being, and to help you kind of move past those things. So these are all the things that you can be thinking about and telling your item that you're enchanting. And let this take as much time as it needs. If you need a few minutes to kind of clarify or focus your thoughts, and you can also take this up again later. Like, we're doing it now together as a group to kind of get the energy flowing and all be doing the same kind of focus together and promoting that energy so that we can all tap into it. But I'm going to be leaving this, the chat room is still going to be open, and this energy is still going to be here later. So if you are doing it together with us now, but then later on you want to kind of rework it again on your own, you can totally do that. And this is all still going to be available to you later. And like I said, I'm also going to put the recording up somewhere. So if you missed any part of it, you can just come back to it and kind of go over it again in your own time. So I'm just giving you guys a few minutes to kind of think of that. And once you're done telling the item what it is that you expect of it, what your goals are, and what you want it to accomplish, then comes the point where you are actually going to kind of close or finalize that intent. And this you want to do by holding it into your right hand and closing your fingers around it. And you want to hold out your hand in front of you and just kind of think about and focus on all the things that you've told it to do, the goals and your expectations of the item. And maintain that focus. This is sometimes easier to do with your eyes closed. If you can do that, maintain that focus until your hand starts to feel heavy to the point that it's feeling kind of weighted towards the floor. Or if your hand starts to tingle or feel numb, then you can put the item aside, and that's the closing for your enchantment. And I'm just going to give a few minutes for you guys to go ahead and do that, and then I'll explain how to use the divination tools to charge or direct energy for the enchantment. Okay, so hopefully that was enough time for you guys to enchant your items. If not, like I said, you can always pick this up again on your own later. Or, this isn't the type of spell that you kind of have to do all in one sequence. You can always kind of touch base with this item later on, or redo the enchantment with the same item or with a different item. This isn't something that has to be, from beginning to end, like a closed cycle. You can pick it up and kind of take up this item and pursue this working with it at any point. So don't worry if you don't feel like you've had fully time right now to do it. You can just continue it later. Sorry. I wanted to just kind of explain how one method that you can use divinatory tools to promote a certain type of energy. So this is something that you want to use with an item that's already been enchanted or programmed. So that would be like what we just did with the item that you picked. The reason why you want to do it with an item that's already enchanted is that the simplest way that I can explain it is basically this item is already kind of awake. You've already woken it up and you've said, hey, like you have a job to do. You're planning this energy. So what you're doing when you're charging it with these divinatory items is you're basically just giving it kind of an extra task or an extra focus. So it already kind of has its main job, and it might just be like, for example, if we've programmed these items today to promote positive or neutral energies. So you might want to say like, hey, more specifically today, I need creativity because I have this project that I'm working on and I need to, I don't know, like write an essay, or I have this painting that I want to do. So, and the reason that we use divinatory tools is because you usually already have a connection with those tools. They already have that meaning to you. So it might be easier for that item to make the connection with the idea that you have. If, let's say, if you have a specific deck of cards, for example, that you constantly are using for tarot, then you can choose a card that represents the type of energy that you want your item to be focused on. And how you charge the item is you can just physically put them together, like just literally place the item, for example, on your card, or have them in the same space. For example, storing the items together, like if, let's say, you have something the next day, then you can just store both items together in a cloth or in your drawer, just something that kind of keeps them both in the same space together. The one thing that you just want to be careful of is, like I was mentioning earlier with the incense and the cleansing spray, you just want to keep them away from other items that would have the opposite meaning, or that would kind of, cancel out that effect. So for example, if you're trying to charge an item let's say you're trying to charge a necklace with the Queen of Swords, because that's the type of energy that you need for the following day. You don't want to put them together with, let's say, your lavender or, like a cleansing type of energy, because then it's just going to be kind of negating any type of working that you're trying to imbue with them. So at that point, your item is already enchanted, so it's not going to become not enchanted, but any new kind of energy that you're trying to put into it might get canceled out by the other item. Same thing if, for example, you're putting it next to a stone that you normally use for cleansing or a crystal that you normally use for cleansing. You don't want to put that next to the two items that you're trying to use to charge each other. I hope that makes sense. Now, that said, obviously, if the type of energy that you want from your enchanted item and you want to charge it with the cleansing energy, well, then by all means, put it with your cleansing type of item. That's totally fine. I just mean don't put a cleansing item next to something that you're trying to charge, because then the charging might just not occur. So that's all I had today for the enchantment and the working. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, if not, then I think that's a good place to end it. Um, I'm going to put the recording, like I said, up on YouTube. It might just take a little bit of time to upload, but once it's done, I'll put it in the posts feed channel. I'll link an unlisted link to that, so then you can just refer back to it if you missed some part of it or if you can't remember anything. But obviously, if anyone has any questions, you can always just ask either in the group chat, or you can just ask me in a private message. That's totally fine. I just have weird sleeping hours, so if I don't answer, it's not because I don't want to answer. It's probably because I'm sleeping or at work or at school. So just please wait, and I'll get back to you as soon as I see it or have time to answer it. But otherwise, thank you everyone for being here. It was cool to have you guys all here, and hopefully the enchantment is useful. Anytime. All right, I'm going to go off of mute, but I'm still going to be around for about 40 minutes or so. So if you guys have anything, just let me know. All right, thank you.